because you already had it one way. Now you're gonna have to.
That's still good. Oh, it's still good, isn't it?
Welcome to Open Book Combos, and I'm Philonda Collins.
I'm Rodney Collins. This is our 11th episode, so. Oh, dang. We're getting a little close. So, we are here in Montego Bay, Jamaica. We are having a good time. My sister-in-law, my wife's sister, Amira, and Chico, congratulations. They just tied the knot this weekend. Been a beautiful ceremony on the ocean, and we enjoyed watching the wedding. And my beautiful wife was in the wedding. And would you say it was a beautiful wedding?
It was. It was very peaceful because it was on the ocean, but very breezy. And but she was an extremely beautiful bride, and I'm sure they will have many years to celebrate.
Yeah, we want to wish you all many years of happy success in your marriage. Love each other. Constantly work on communication. As I learn each and every day that I have to grow as a communicator. And also just learning to love each other and love each other unconditionally. Sorry, I just had breakfast, so sorry about that. But wanted to just talk about when I was watching the wedding and some of the things that were going through my mind and thinking about stuff that you need to keep at the forefront when you get married, and it's that you need to never forget how precious and what a gift it is to have somebody to spend the rest of your life with. That was something that I was thinking about as I was watching the wedding. Made me a little emotional. Because I can think about times when I may have been a little stubborn, where decisions I could have made could have costed us our marriage. So it made me realize that you have to take every moment as a blessing, and you never take it for granted the person who's with you. You never take them for granted that they'll always be at your side, and you cherish each moment that you have together. So that's what it was making me think about doing the wedding.
I mean, I guess because there was some preparation, not as much preparation since it was a destination wedding, but there was still some preparation. So a lot of times I know for females, we can put a lot of time and energy and finances into the wedding day, but not actually be purposeful in laying the right foundation before actually getting married to ensure that there is a healthy marriage. So I think that it's just as important, if not, I would even say more important actually, to do premarital counseling and to have like discussions about likes, dislikes, things that are negotiable versus not negotiable. Such as like, one person wanting to have children or someone not wanting to have children, and also just how the household will be ran with finances and things of that nature. All of those things are so important. How you're going to raise your children, if you're going to elect to do timeout versus not doing timeout, how will you discipline your children? Will you always have a united front? And so yes, it always, when attending weddings, makes you think about your own relationship and assess where you are, and causes you sometimes to think back on that day and that moment that you actually had when you were getting ready to get married. And so I think, it is truly awesome, and it's nice. And so, and just being somewhere that's tropical, it's nice to have someone to share that with. And sometimes, just as you were saying, you can take someone for granted. And sometimes, the road is not always smooth, and it's not always peaches and cream. And so when there are hiccups in the road, or when there may be a drought season in a relationship, how are those things going to be handled in order to persevere through those? Because oftentimes, some people just call it quits, or they may say, irreconcilable differences. And so, when you decide to get married, you do take a pledge, and you make a commitment not only to the person that you're marrying, but you also make a commitment before the Lord, because you're making a covenant with Him as well as with your spouse. So it is very key and very crucial to do various things to be able to continue that, have that love and that commitment to the person that you have on that very day that you decide to get married.
That's pretty good. I think she kind of covered it all.
You always do that.
Well, you do. You cover a lot, so I'll just say this. But one thing I have learned to do is to be more of a listener than a talker in relationships. I think that's when you really try to understand the other person's viewpoint, perspective. And that's something that you don't want to listen with the intent to respond. You want to listen with the intent to understand. And I think that's a difference that we struggle with, because when somebody's talking to us, the first thing we do is we're listening, but we're preparing in our head our rebuttal right away, so as soon as they're done, we can start. But I think it's important that you listen to try to understand what's going on in that person, because it could be something else. It might not even be you, that reason why they're acting weird or whatever. It could just be there's other deeply rooted issues that are affecting that person. And when you come into a marriage, I don't care how many accolades you've achieved in the professional world, how many degrees you have, we are broken people. And you got two broken people coming together in a marriage trying to make one whole. So it's a lot of work. And that's when you got to be willing to do the work of the relationship. And it's a fun thing, because it's fun to make up too. But it's also, when you have those struggles, you have to be willing to say, you know what, this is part of the deal too. This is what I'm here for. I'm here to help this person through life too. That person is not attacking me. That person is hurt. And sorry about that. So that's what you come together for. You come together to bring glory to God's name. That's one thing I believe you're supposed to do in a relationship, and that's what a marriage is supposed to show, that how God loves us unconditionally, how God loves us with grace, gives us mercy, forgives us. And that's how we're supposed to love each other. That's how we're supposed to love our children, whatever children are born from the marriage. And that's one thing that we struggle with, because we are, as a people, quick to write somebody off as soon as they turn us the wrong way. And it's just a defense mechanism. It's like, well, I ain't gonna let nobody else hurt me like that. How often have we hurt God? How often do we hurt our children? When we disappoint them, how often do we hurt our spouses or our significant others? How often do we hurt each other? So, marriage, attending a wedding is beautiful. It was nice to see the view on the ocean. I think some of the marriage you can actually see on Amira's page, if some of you guys are friends of her. I don't know how many Facebook friends she got, so she might be kind of private with her page. But Charmaine has some stuff out there. So, but it was a beautiful day to watch. We actually encountered some difficulty on our journey here that tested our patience. So we learned to keep calm while traveling out of the way. So what I learned is sometimes the path that you think you're on, it's going to be diverted sometimes. But if you still keep your eyes focused on where you're heading to, you'll still get to that destination. And this is the example. We're heading to Jamaica on, last Wednesday when we left? And we had an issue with our flight once we got to Florida. So the issue caused us to have to take another flight into another part of Jamaica that was 3 hours away from our destination. And then we had to end up taking transportation from that airport to our arrival city. So, but throughout that whole time, I have to commend my wife because normally she would have been real irritated and kind of like, I don't know.
I was irritated.
Yeah, but but you handled it much better than what you normally would. I acknowledge that you was irritated, but you didn't let it take you to a negative place, a negative space. You still were able to stay in the moment, even though you was ready to fight. So I think it's important that we do try to stay calm and stay in the moment where we're at. You keep a cool head. Cooler heads always prevail.
I mean, I think even with that though, because really, I mean, like even though it's my sister and I would love to partake, I really wanted to just turn around.
I know.
Because it was a very frustrating situation, and it was like something that was completely out of our control and nothing to our own fault. And so I wanted to just be like, okay, forget it. I don't have time. I can just turn around, go home, call it a day. And you know, at that point, it was just like, you were like, no, we got this. We're going to make it work. We're going to figure this out. And so I guess sometimes when, you know, one spouse is ready to throw in the towel or to not go forward with something, then the other person can be the motivator or the catalyst to continue to propel, you know, each other to move forward instead of moving backwards. And so, and I guess, you know, from time to time I do find in our relationship, you know, that there, you know, are just definitely times like when one is weak, the other one is strong. And so you basically support each other, you know, when necessary and when needed in order to basically be that cheerleader or to be that motivational individual or coach to help, you know, get that person to proceed and to move forward instead of backwards. And, you know, you just constantly need that, you know, in life, not just, you know, in the relationship, but, you know, because even though you're one, you still have various things in your life that you're sort of having to deal with as far as on an individual standpoint, like whether it's professional or just personal, you know, type things and goals. And so sometimes when the world sort of ends up being against you or want to be against you, then you know that one person who is the most close to you as far as your spouse can basically be there to support you and give you what is needed in that hour, that moment, or in that season. So I think that's very important as well.
Okay. All right. So
we didn't really have an agenda today.
No. We're on vacation.
So
we don't have to have an agenda right now.
And then we were not here the week before because we were not feeling well.
Unforeseen circumstances.
So we're really trying to definitely remain consistent and continue to share various things with you. And I think I'm remembering as far as, let me even just see. Someone actually asked, you know,
we got a question.
When you are in a season that is considered to be a drought season, so I guess, like, you know, what is that exactly? What does that mean when someone's in a drought season? And so I guess, how would you describe a drought season in a marriage or in a relationship? While I find
Are you asking me to address it? Or?
I'm asking, first of all, what is it? Because what if some people don't really understand what a drought?
Well, this is what a drought is, and then we'll relate it to a marriage. But a drought, we look at the fruits dry up, trees dry up, grass is not green, it's brown. Everything around you is thirsty. It doesn't have water. Everything is dry. So just relate what a drought looks like. Picture a desert that looks so barren. That's what your marriage starts to look like in a drought season. Whether it's the money dries up, your time together dries up, even the intimacy starts to dry up. How you view each other dries up. What do you do? what do you do to allow the rain to begin to fall back in your marriage? Because that's a dangerous time, because a drought causes you to look other places for your needs to be met. And you have to be careful about that. We all have to be careful.
Or it could just cause you to...
I'm not talking like outside extramarital stuff, but just saying I'll be better off just by myself if it's going to be like this, that type of feeling.
Well, I think it can go both ways, what you just said. But I think also that sometimes when there's a drought season, depending upon a person's personality, you can sort of get consumed with your career or consumed with personal goals, to whereas you just focus on those things and not really focus on reviving a relationship, to whereas it's like you become a roommate, you know, with your spouse, and like it's not as intimate. And so, you know, so the question was, how can couples successfully walk through
Charmaine,
a
you're supposed to
season
get ready to
of
get on the
drought?
plane. I see you watching. Hello.
How can couples successfully walk through a season of drought? That was the question.
How can you successfully walk through a season?
It's hard.
This is going to be a lot longer than a 15-minute talk. This is like 7 pages, 7 episodes that you have to delve in, because it's like so many different layers. I have to tell you, first of all, when we dealt with the drought in our marriage, where it got very challenging, is I had to do a lot of self-evaluation of who I was as a man. I looked at certain decisions that I've made over the years. I looked at, why did I marry Philanda? And what were my expectations about that? And then I had to look at the fact that Philanda has been by my side. Now it's going on 25 plus years, and then 22 years of marriage. And I was like, there's a lot to be said about that. She's not just going to stay with somebody who's not meeting needs or not being the man that she wants him to be. So you start looking at you look at other things that helps you realize that, you know, it's not just you. I think what happens is self-pity can kick in too, because when you look at yourself too much, you can beat yourself up and say, well, I'm the reason for this, I'm the reason for that, I'm the reason for whatever. And what it does is it causes you to kind of cocoon, like get in a little shell by yourself and start. And self-pity is probably one of the worst things we can do, because it sounds funny, but the irony is self-pity is selfish. It's like, you know, when you're self-deprecating and putting yourself down too much, you're actually being selfish. Because all you're doing is thinking about you, and it's like, wait a second. What about this woman? What about this man who has stood in there with you? There's something about you that's kept them around. So start thinking about some of the things that, like, you gotta just get old school. Just make a notepad and put the pluses and minuses. Start writing down, what is it about this person that I love? What is it about me? Start just going down that list. How does God see you? That's where you start, though. How does God see you? Now let me measure that up to how I'm being as a husband, how I'm being as a spouse. Am I being her friend? Am I being her lover? You know, am I really loving her? Or am I taking advantage of the fact that I have a wife and, you know, I can be intimate whenever I want to. I don't have to do everything that's needed to romance her, to make her want to be with me. These are things that we always have to evaluate, because it's constant work. Marriage does not stop once you jump the broom or whatever. When you get married, that is just the beginning, and you scratching the surface on a huge issue of life. It's got a long way to go, and it constantly changes, constantly evolves. My parents have been married 50 years this year, and one thing that I've learned from them is that they have learned to accept each other for who they are, and not try to change that person. And that person that you fell in love with, that's the one that you said you wanted to be with.
I would say that you have to sort of also reflect and look back on what were some of the things that you all ended up doing. Like if you had date night, or if you set aside so many days within a month to actually date, that you have to sort of look at that. What type of things did you do, as you were saying, as far as to romance him or to romance her? What were some of those things?
Yeah, I like to be seduced.
Okay, well, and so
By my wife.
So, and even just, I think too that sometimes, you know, just listening and hearing somebody out their day, that's important. Because sometimes, like you said, as far as like, are you actively listening, or are you just like somewhat listening? You know, so you could be like, okay, I listened, and you know, now we can move on or whatever. And then sometimes you might need to just change your space, even if it's changing it for a day or for 2 nights. Like you do a staycation, whether it's actually in the home and you're doing things, or you go somewhere locally and you stay at a hotel. And even just like being honest and just saying how you feel, but just saying it with love, and just saying like, I just sort of feel like we sort of lost our way, like we don't really like hug as much, or we don't really kiss as much, or whatever the case may be. But all of those things are very important. And you know, just even getting away, like we hadn't been anywhere for
2 years,
a couple years, and so
that's not good.
It is really important to go somewhere, even if it's just a one-tank trip to a bed and breakfast. But going somewhere is really crucial because it allows you to refresh and rejuvenate, and so it's important to do that. But you also just have to be willing to put in the work, like, and not just be like, well, I'm just like kind of tired and I'm over it. And you know, when you don't necessarily have the strength that you want to do it, then you have to just pray for strength to be given to you in order to continue to move forward in the relationship or in the marriage. And so it's very key to do that when it's a drought. But I remember too, we ended up taking a trip to Las Vegas, and we were really at a crossroads of whether or not we were going to proceed, or if we were going to go separate ways, just because like it's amazing. Like I don't even remember the exact, I mean, I know that it just seemed like it was just a very dry season, but I don't remember all the specifics.
There was just like a lot of different things that happened in our lives, but just we got preoccupied with certain things. There was business failures that happened. And there were dissatisfaction with career, frustration. We just
so I guess
getting a little bit older. There's a whole bunch of things kicking in.
So would you say like it was the relationship suffered as a result of just being so consumed with so many
outside
other external factors, or just being like overwhelmed or depressed with your own scenarios and situations, to where it causes you to be reclusive or like to yourself?
And just like I said, self-pity kicks in.
Okay.
And then you become selfish.
So you don't really have room for the other person, because you just feel like you just
and you're all about what you're going through.
So I'm still working through that. So I guess basically it's very possible to be in a season and still just working through it, just having an open heart and a willing heart to continue to work through it, in essence.
Well, I'm gonna give a quick PSA for therapy. I think it's important that when you start going through that you need an unbiased third party to process with. And I know I went through a part point back in 2014, 2015. I went through a depression. And I'm writing about that. That's in my book that'll be coming out soon, entitled Living Dangerous. Shameless plug. But I'll be talking about more of that. But the whole thing is, oh no, my battery getting low. But you might need to turn yours on. But I was just talking about the fact that everybody needs to have a therapist in their life. It's okay to have somebody who you can process things with, who's going to be able to stand back and look at your situation objectively and not give this biased answer from one side or the other. That really helped me evaluate. And a lot of things that I was dealing with personally was unforgiveness, which was the root of a lot of stuff that I dealt with. And that unforgiveness spilled out into every area of my life. I've never been, the type of person that just is like, I've never been a mean person or just difficult. But during that time, it caused me to really withdraw. Even from my son and daughter, I was just really just cocooning. And it was all about me. So I had to come through that process, but having a therapist really helped me to grow out of that. So African Americans, black people, I'm just going to say black people, we don't like doing therapy because we think something's wrong with therapy. No, something's wrong when you need therapy and you don't go get it. That's when something's wrong.
And I mean, even we were saying that it's important to do premarital counseling prior to getting married. It's also important to even do counseling if necessary, just to work through any situation, whether it's just dealing with communication or just a rough patch. It's really important to, have some type of counseling that someone who can be neutral and just allow you to ask you the right questions to be able to work through, maneuver through a variety of things. So, pretty much, I guess that would be it.
I do want to talk more about this, and this kind of led me to the topic. We are going to have a guest next week, a very good friend of ours, Jerry Prim, is going to be on. He's a strong man living back there in Cleveland, doing things well. He's a single father, activist in the city. Some of you guys know Jerry Prim, and I'll tag him on this so he'll remember that he's supposed to be on our show. And then we're going to get back to this. I do want to talk more about being courageous enough to get therapy and acknowledging that when you're broken that you need help. If you never acknowledge the brokenness, it'll come out in so many ways that eventually the harm it'll destroy your marriage or whatever relationships. It'll affect your relationships with your kids. And before you know, you'll turn around and you'll blink and everything you thought you had will be gone.
Or even just impact your day-to-day life, where you're just not really able to function to the highest capacity that you should be able to because you haven't really worked with things. And so I know Michelle from Destiny's Child ended up checking herself into a facility to seek out counseling because she said that she's always dealt with depression, but she just didn't know that that's what it was called.
Right.
And so, once again, as far as like depression or anything dealing with mental illness or counseling, a lot of times within the African American community, it was very taboo to discuss or talk about, or some people saw it as you being weak by seeking out counseling. But once again, it's just a way to be asked the right questions so that you can get to the bottom of what actually is going on in the inside. What are some things that you internalized along the way, and how did certain relationships impact you to whereas it's impacting your marriage or other relationships that you may have. So it's very key, and some people are, successful in doing that because they journal and they ask themselves, questions, or they read, self-help books, and as a way of working through some of those books and them asking you certain questions and you pondering some of those questions, that can also be another effective way to do those various things. But definitely it's not being weak in order to seek out any type of counseling. So
yeah, I agree. So we're going to go ahead and let you go because my cell phone battery is starting to die. So we will see you all next week. We don't have the exact time when we'll be doing the show, but we definitely will be back on next week. We love you all. Once again, chime in with subjects you want to talk about. And it's kind of like we're inviting you into our home. So come on over and talk to us, sit on our couch, and we'll sit on your couch and talk about our issues. And just bring healing to each other. And if you continue to just stay focused, love God, love people, and love yourself, and we will see you next week.
Take care.